Hello, sunshine. I'm Alexi LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, well, of course, USA-Mexico, an epic USA-Mexico edition. We'll be talking the Euros 2020, I guess is what we're calling it. We will be talking Copa America 2021. We'll be talking a little bit of Gold Cup and Streets of Fire and all sorts of different stuff out there. I usually write it down, but there's just so much stuff, and obviously a lot of it is focused on this U.S.-Mexico craziness that we saw that we're going to dig right into that. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, June 7th, the day after USA-Mexico?
I'm doing well after a rare weekend off where I got to watch soccer strictly for pleasure and not for work.
How does it differ when you are watching the game for pleasure as opposed to for work? How does it manifest? Do you go someplace different? Do you sit differently? Do you have a computer with you or not with you, or how does it change?
Well, for one, I don't have former U.S. national team players asking me annoying questions throughout the game. I got a nice little setup here in the living room where I can kind of lay out and enjoy the game. And working in the business, you sort of think a little bit about how different networks do things and compare and contrast and all that. But for the most part, I'm able to kind of shut off that part of my brain and just enjoy the game.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you did. Watch anything interesting this week?
I did actually. I watched the Sir Alex Ferguson documentary, which was recommended to me by our good friend Jason Wormser, host of the Wormcast, which I believe you've been a guest on, correct?
Yep.
I have
check
not
it out.
yet.
It's always fun. He talks about a lot of things, sports and soccer related, but also the industry related, because he's been in our industry for a long time.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that call. It hasn't come yet, which is fine. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was incredibly well done. You've seen it, right?
I saw it this week. It's one of the things that I saw. I watched a bunch of stuff this week, but yeah, exactly. That was one of Sir Alex Ferguson. Never Give In is what it's called right now. You can find it on Paramount Plus, I think.
Yeah, which for those who haven't seen, the conceit of it is he had a major health scare in 2018, brain issue, and his main concern was losing his memory because he's lived this incredible life and experienced so many amazing things. And he really cherishes those memories, and he didn't want to, have to live without remembering all these things that happened to him. And so he takes us through all those memories because fortunately he came out of that health scare with his memory still intact. And so the documentary is him reflecting on his incredible life from his childhood in Glasgow and growing up. And I found the pre-Manchester United stuff absolutely fascinating. His playing career, Rangers, that whole issue with his wife being a Catholic, and then his managerial success at Aberdeen, which to me elevates him even more. I mean, obviously what he did at Manchester United is what makes him this transcendent figure, but you tend to forget that he also had major success at another place and really broke up that Celtic Rangers duopoly, and Aberdeen was the major force in Scottish football there for several years, including beating Real Madrid in a European final. So he is an absolute legend, and fascinating to hear him talk about the game. So I loved it. I love this documentary.
I did enjoy it too. It's not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but I would certainly recommend it. It should be noted too that his son was the producer and I guess the director of this, and so you have to kind of factor that in. I think you got to know the man more, and to your point, a lot of the archival type of footage, and to see him not just as a coach but as a young man, and to learn more about him from a personal perspective, I thought was interesting. But I also think that there was probably a lot of stuff that was either swept aside, or just I don't necessarily think that we found everything, and that's sometimes to be expected. And everybody comes with their biases and stuff like that. I mean, some of the machine and the fuel that I think made Sir Alex Ferguson what he was kind of glossed over, and the personal relationships and the sacrifices that he made were just kind of, well, he was at work and he missed out on a lot of things growing up. So, I mean, which kind of just hits the surface on a lot of that stuff.
And we should say the documentary more or less ends with the 99 Champions League final win over Bayern, completing that treble. They sort of yada, yada, yada everything that came after that, Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, and winning another Champions League title. So if you're a Manchester United fan that's looking for a real extensive documentary on his Manchester United career, you might be left a little bit wanting here, because it's more about everything that led up to Manchester United, and then the first part of his Manchester United career, the first iteration, that team he built with Cantona and the class of '92, and it's way more focused on that than anything that came after it.
I should tell you that while we're recording this, I just got a text from the great Sarah Walsh, who we have both worked with. And because of our recommendation on Mayor of Easttown, she is knee deep in it and cursing us as we speak, because she can't stop watching this now. So I think mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned. All right, I'm going to blaze through a bunch of stuff that I watched, because I said, like I said, I watched all sorts of stuff. Mean Man is a bio and documentary on Chris Holmes, guitarist for Wasp, and you may know him for his legendary scene and appearance in The Decline of Western Civilization, Part 2, The Metal Years, I think, where he was bubbling up a huge bottle of vodka in a pool while his mother watched on and just showed the excess. You can find that on Amazon. I thought it was interesting. He's moved on to France and lives in France, but still is a guitarist and a musician. Silicon Cowboys, which is the wars between Compaq and IBM. You can find that on Amazon. And if you liked, Halt and Catch Fire and Silicon Valley, the series and stuff like that, this is a great documentary on the actual people that took on IBM and the David and Goliath type of story that was. I think we've talked about this before, but All Things Must Pass, the Tower Records, the story of Tower Records. I think we've talked about that before. It's just a really, really good documentary about the rise and fall. We talked about the rise and fall of Blockbuster and these documentaries of these once iconic type of brands, and watching their pathway to success, and then seeing the world change and the failure coming after that. Going back in time, Streets of Fire, 1984, I think, with Diane Lane and Michael Paré, does not hold up, but there's some interesting music in it. I didn't see this because I was turned off by the title of the movie. Zach and Miri Make a Porno, not because it was a porno. It was just long, and I didn't think it was going to be that interesting. It is hilarious. It came out, I think, in 2008 with Seth Rogen and Elizabeth Banks. So much better than I thought it was going to be. You mentioned the Sir Alex Ferguson thing, and then way back in 1971, Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland came out with a movie called Clute. And I had never seen it. It's actually a pretty famous movie in Academy Awards and that kind of stuff. It's very 70s. I will say that. But I think it's worth it for her performance and the slower pace that kind of defined a lot of movies back then that just would either not fly or just isn't done nowadays. Anyway, so those are my recommendations out there. All right, enough of that. Mosse, you got anything to add before we go on?
No, that's it.
All right, let's light this candle, and let's light it right at the top here with USA Mexico. We are recording this as we always do on a Monday morning. What a night! What a night in the annals of history when it comes to USA Mexico. And there's so much when it comes to USA Mexico, both on and off the field. This is yet another chapter, but a chapter that I think will live long in our memories for just the whole thing. So in general, first off, congratulations to Greg Berhalter and to this team for winning a trophy. Now, I know it's a brand new trophy, and I was in, like I said, I was in a bar for the first time in a long time actually watching the game. And there were some folks that started watching it just because we were hooting and hollering, screaming and yelling. And I had to explain to them what this was. And it's not easy for people that aren't, in it. But ultimately, when it came right down to it, they knew that United States versus Mexico in soccer, that was a big thing, regardless of what the Nations League was or anything like that. So they got hooked into it. And it's still an opportunity. And don't think for a second that this wasn't everything coming together for CONCACAF. This is exactly why this tournament was made. If this tournament had featured in the final the United States versus Costa Rica or Mexico versus Honduras, it would not have been the same. This is why these tournaments are constructed, and in the back of everybody's mind, you are hoping that this happens. And so we're going to broadcast the Gold Cup here in a few weeks. from a business perspective and from a competitive perspective, we want to see U.S.-Mexico in the final in Las Vegas. Doesn't always happen like that, but the stars aligned. Soccer gods smiled on CONCACAF for this Nations League, and it was everything that it often promises to be, but doesn't always live up to it. So in general, Mosse, what were your thoughts after that game?
It's funny because going into these two games, I know we're all sick of friendlies and there was a trophy on the line, so it was billed as, okay, now things count. But I was still in this headspace that these are glorified friendlies. It's preparing for the thing that really matters, which is World Cup qualifying, and that the performance was more important than the result. And yet the way these two games unfolded and the atmosphere in the stadium, by the second half of the Mexico game, it really dawned on me, no, this is very meaningful. And this became more about finding a way to win this game, to the point where I moved all the way to, at the end of last night's game, any attempt to really overanalyze the performance, I sort of rolled my eyes and felt like, well, you're missing the point. It wasn't about that. So it was an interesting journey I went to, from feeling like these were glorified friendlies to no, this was like a massively significant result for the U.S. It did feel like, you don't want to overblow these things, but it did feel like the first moment for this generation of players that could provide a lot more great moments over the next 10 years and could be the generation of players that takes the U.S. to the next level. And it did feel very significant for a program that's had this dark cloud hanging over them since 2017 to finally erase that and fully win back the fans. So you put that all together and it felt like a very significant result, actually.
You mentioned something I think is important. The result obviously is the most important thing when we are analyzing this, right? But how that result came to be, and I said this last night on Twitter, I said that for all the talk of being a more progressive and evolved and mature type of approach that Greg Berhalter, or I guess the arrival of Greg Berhalter has promised, when it really came down to in this game was almost and this is not a pejorative, a regressive or old school type of U.S. performance that ultimately won out in the end. And for an old guy like myself, that warms the cockles of my redheaded heart. I mean, that just to see that, I'm interested to get your opinion, because is that a problem? Is it too rudimentary? Is it too regressive in that, okay, you get away with it in this game against Mexico, but we have higher aspirations? Or is it fair to think about it in this way?
No, I think it's such a great point that you made. And I saw that tweet last night, and I knew you were going to bring it up today. It is interesting how things have been recontextualized with the U.S. In past generations, you felt like the grit and the toughness was a given, and there was this question of whether there was enough talent. And with this group, you feel like the talent is a given, and the question was whether there was enough grit and toughness. And they showed that last night. And so that combination augurs well, because the talent is there. I don't think they played great in either one of these games, but there were enough flashes where you could see the things that Pulisic and Reyna and Dest do with the ball there, where the talent is there. And this is a special generation of players coming up. But now the fact that they showed that grit and toughness as well, and that if they have to, they can win a game that way, I thought it was very significant. And I would frame it as a positive, the way they won that game last night.
Me too. All right, listen, programming note, I'm going to talk more about the crowd situation later on in the pod, because I think it deserves its own little segment, because it's an important part of this story. So just know that when we don't necessarily talk a whole lot about that. So let's get to on the field. The starting 11s come out, and no Musa, so I think people were surprised a little bit about that. A Tim Ream appearance, and I guess most importantly from a tactical perspective is a 3/5 in the back, which gives more cover to Dest, which we've talked about. And they have played this in the past, but you had McKenzie, Brooks, and Tim Ream. And obviously it did not start well for the U.S. A minute into the game, and Mexico scores on just a horrible decision from McKenzie in the back. They get snipped. Mexico goes in and scores. Now, in that moment, I kept thinking about, how people that don't like Greg Berhalter or want Greg Berhalter to fail are thinking, oh my goodness. Now, this is the best laid plans. No coach goes out there and coaches for the center back in the first minute to make a bonehead type of pass like that and score 1-0. But it's always going to be reflective. Now, when that goal goes in, Mosse, what are you thinking? This is going to be a long night? Because I know I was.
Yeah. I mean, I do think we maybe need to have a conversation about this whole playing out of the back thing with the U.S., because this is 2 games in a row against Mexico where they've essentially gifted Mexico a goal by doing that. And you just wonder, you do the risk reward calculation, the trade-off, if there was the occasional turnover, but by playing out of the back, it was helping the U.S. Maintain possession and play with more fluidity and have all these nice team moves that start all the way from the back. Then okay, maybe the trade-off is worth it. But I didn't really see that last night. It felt like most of the chances the U.S. created were clearances or 50-50 balls they won in the midfield that ended up at the feet of Pulisic and Reyna, and they were able to turn and run with it. I didn't see a lot of moves that started all the way at the back. And so it doesn't seem like you're gaining all that much from it, and you're giving up goals in games where you really can't afford to be giving away goals like that. So I'm as progressive as they come, but I think we do need to have a bit of a conversation about the playing out of the back thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, you get away with it ultimately in this game, but you put yourself in such a bad position, and needlessly, to your point. All right, in terms of the starting lineup, Mosse, and ultimately, again, Josh Sargent, and there's actually rumors that Josh Sargent is being looked at by some other teams in the Bundesliga and associated with other teams in the Bundesliga. I want him to be associated with goals. Okay. So I don't care where he goes, but let's have him be associated with goals, because I didn't think he did anything to again establish himself as that person up top. He was, for great periods in that game, non-existent. Is it the fault of his own or others? I mean, we can debate that, but ultimately you're up there to generate chances and to score chances. That's your job. Gio Reyna obviously scored the goal. That was a good thing, but I also think that he was more effective, and I think he's still growing into himself and to the game. Christian Pulisic, I mean, let's be honest, he was non-existent and a non-factor for most of the game. But until that moment that he ultimately created and then finished in terms of the penalty. But in general, overall in that game, I think Mexico did a really good job of snuffing him out when he got going. And when he gets going, it's difficult, because even though you want to, it doesn't always happen. But he dribbled into multiple times, dribbled into Mexican players, and they saw it coming. Weston Mckennie, if anybody needed any further proof that he is not the only one, but a lot of that beating heartbeat of this team. All right. He's not perfect. He's not the most skilled player out there, but the things that he does, and ultimately in big moments, were on display. John Brooks is still, if he goes down, I think this U.S. team has a big problem in the back. Zach Steffen, speaking of going down, did go out, and the Ethan Horvath. I mean, we were screaming Horvath in the bar. Everyone screamed. It was an amazing scene. All right, before we get into a little bit more of the details, though, just in terms of personnel, and I didn't hit on everybody out there, but it wasn't if you were to grade all of these players, it's not like a lot of players are getting the A's and B's out there.
No, and going all the way back to the first guy you mentioned, Sargent, his greatest contribution to 2 games was that goal line clearance against Honduras in the first half, which was amazing. He did have a nice moment early on last night, right after Mexico scored that opening goal, where the first time he got the ball, he spun away from a defender and had a nice run into the box and took a shot that Ochoa parried. But yeah, overall disappointing from him. I would say Reyna was magnificent last night. I would give him very high marks. But no, overall, I agree with most of what you've said. If this was a boxing fight, which at times it seemed like it, and you were scoring it on points, I think you'd give it to Mexico last night. They were the more dangerous team from the run of play. Really, the difference in that game was their abject inability to defend set pieces, which made it all the more inexcusable how cheaply they were giving away set pieces. The GOAT of that game from a Mexico perspective is Luis Rodriguez. You just scored Lainez to go up 2-1. It's the 80th minute. The U.S. hasn't created a whole lot from the run of play. So you think as long as we don't give away any cheap set pieces here the rest of this game, we should be in good shape. And what does he do? He has control of the ball in the box, nobody around him. He could have rolled it back to Ochoa. He could have turned around and cleared it up the field, even cleared it out for a throw-in. The one thing he couldn't do there, which he did, was he trips over the ball. It squirts out for a corner. And I immediately thought, oh, the soccer gods are going to punish this. Weston Mckennie has gotten on the end of every single corner tonight. There's no reason to think he's not going to get on the end of this one. And this one is finally going to go in, and it did. And so that's where Tata has to be kicking himself. But yeah, so it wasn't a great U.S. performance. Look, set pieces are part of the game. Credit to him, but still, when you both your goals come on set pieces, it does speak a little bit to some of the issues you had creating chances from the run of play. So
hold on, they all count the same. All right,
absolutely no. And listen, it's not a fluke with McKennie. He is unbelievable. You see it with Juventus. You see him with Schalke. He is unbelievable at getting on the end of these set pieces.
It's innate. And it's wonderful to see, because even when you know what is happening, he still finds a way. And he could have scored a couple of others there and was getting on the end of them. And everybody in the stadium knew, everybody on the field knew that this was going to happen. It happened. And I talk a lot about set pieces, and I know it's people oftentimes make fun of it, but they are a huge part of the game. And the U.S. recognized that they had an advantage in that, first off, they were able to create them, and second off, they were able to capitalize them off of them more often than not, especially with someone like McKennie out there. All right, when it comes to the penalties, Mosse, because I think actually VAR had a good game, I guess, if you will, if VAR
awkwardly placed between the two benches.
Right? I know. I know. What are we doing here? Why? Jeez. All right. Don't get me started. So when it comes to the two penalties, just VAR in general, because it could have been 2-0. Very easily, 2-0 could have happened for Mexico, and that would have been the end of the game, I think. But VAR took it back. It stayed 1-0, and then we went on. Did you think that either the U.S. penalty or the Mexico penalty were deserving?
I thought the Mexico one was more of a penalty than the U.S. one. So I thought the U.S. caught a little bit of a break there in that trade-off. But I will say Hector Herrera should have been sent off from that game. So to me, that more than evens it out the other way. So I don't think Mexico has a gripe when you take all the calls into it. And no question about the disallowed goal, by the way. Moreno was clearly offside, so that was a correct decision there.
Yeah, but the Herrera thing is so difficult, because I rate him as possibly the best and most important player on that Mexican team. I don't understand what he was doing. And he was right on that line. And I know the referee didn't want to throw anybody out and change it, but you would have been well within your rights multiple times to say, this is not happening. You're gone. And he didn't. That's disappointing. All right. So when, the Christian Pulisic is taken down for the penalty, looking at it at the bar, and then seeing the thing, I didn't think it was a penalty. Okay. I thought that the Mexican defender got in and actually placed himself in between Christian Pulisic and the ball. The question was, and probably ultimately where this came down to from a VAR perspective, is the other Mexican defender that was there that possibly inhibited or pushed Christian Pulisic, that ultimately led to him going down. Look, I'll take it from a U.S. perspective. And then, on the other side, it actually, from a referee's perspective, it was godsend, right? I mean, because he gets to equal it up in two calls that, while we can argue it, you can certainly justify. And so now it's about finishing. And, Ethan Horvath comes in for Zach Steffen. I still don't know at the point of this recording, we don't know exactly what's going on with Zach Steffen, but it didn't look good in that he thought he could continue, and then you could see him wincing, and something was going on with his knee. He's had some injuries, but much more of the arthritis, problems that he's had over the years, even back when he was in the Bundesliga. So I don't know ultimately what's going to happen, but it's nice to know that you can bring Ethan Horvath in. And I was watching it, like I said, with some people around me, and some that had never even heard of him or watched him. And he does not, how should I put this delicately? He does not present in a way that instills confidence. I mean, optics and appearances and all that kind of stuff, they matter. And he's, he just looks like Ethan Horvath, right? And yet he comes in, and it doesn't matter ultimately what you look like if you're a goalkeeper. You just got to save the ball. And he did. And obviously let a goal in, but it came through players' legs and came back against the grain. And there's plenty of other culpability on that goal. But well done. And thank you, Ethan Horvath, for coming in and ultimately playing the hero in a game that was full of heroes and villains and all sorts of stuff that goes on. Do you think, Mosse, that this result changes the narrative or the perspective or the perception of Greg Berhalter, especially for those people that have kind of had the daggers out for him, because this is, to your point, this is a big result. We all know that qualifying for the World Cup and doing well at the World Cup is the most important thing, but this in the line of chipping away and trying to get some more credibility and respect from a Greg Berhalter and for this team, this is important. Do you think it changes anybody's mind?
I do, yeah. I think it was a big result for him. He needed a signature win, which he now has, so that gives him a little bit of breathing room moving forward, and he can focus on preparing the team for qualifying.
I don't think it changes anybody's mind. I think if you have it out for Greg Berhalter for whatever reason, maybe some completely fair, maybe some unfair, but this is sports. This is the way we go it. You'll look at the fact that the lineup was changed, that you played Tim Ream, or they didn't play Moose, or whatever it ends up being. By the way, I mentioned that Christian Pulisic was non-existent. So was Serginho Dest. So all of this movement in order to accommodate this player actually didn't change anything. I mean, there were times where I didn't even know if he was on the field.
That's going to be moving forward. If he sticks with this formation, then Serginho Dest, we're going to always judge it on, did he do enough to justify this change? And so, yeah, and last night you could argue, no, he didn't. And yeah, it was an interesting night for the U.S. defense, because Mexico, they have some live wires, man. That Corona, and then Chucky Lozano and Antuna and Lainez was on fire after he came on. It was interesting because by the time Lainez came on for Antuna, Corona had come out for Henry Martin. So we never got to see the trio that would have been fun, would have been Corona, Lozano, and Lainez. And by the way, one note on that, Mexico, they do have an issue at the center forward position. Now, they played Chucky there at the start and then brought in Henry Martin. Obviously, it's horrible what happened with Raul Jimenez, and we hope he gets back on the field. But if he doesn't, and if Tata doesn't buy into Chicharito being all the way back to his best, then you're left with trying to talk yourself into one of these Liga MX strikers who I cover Liga MX. To me, none of these Henry Martin types are of real international pedigree and somebody that's going to put fear into a real quality back line. So there's a potential issue there for Mexico moving forward at the center forward position. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, you have these, let's be honest, kind of slow-footed U.S. defenders trying to keep up with these little quick, jittery, live-wire Mexican forwards. So it made for an awkward night at times. But I mean, the McKenzie issue aside, the beginning, I mean, for the rest of the night, they held up relatively well, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when that ball went out wide to the right-hand side for Mexico, and Lainez got that ball, I mean, not just the goal, every single time I was, please, anybody else, because his ability, that whole, off-wing type of thing to come into your stronger foot. Yeah, it was very difficult. I mean, I'm not crying for Mexico. They don't have anybody necessarily up top. They will figure it out. But you did see, obviously, the frustration and the passion and the emotion both on the field, especially when things started to go south for Mexico, or Tata Martino off the field, who ultimately got ejected. And this, once again, just put this up in the continuing chapter and book that is USA Mexico. And I think there's a lot of people. I know a lot of people complained that it was on too late. And if you're on the East Coast, yeah, you were up very, very late last night. And CBS, ultimately, this is when they decided to put it on. But they got themselves something pretty special. I think as the game wore on and the stuff started to happen, I think a lot of more people came in and said, all right, something's going on, and watched it. But so to button it up here, we do give credence to this. This is important in terms of this evolution and this progression of this national team under Greg Berhalter. And I would agree with you. I think it is important. I think it is a touchstone, because we're talking still about, even with all the talent and all the value and all the the resumes and stuff like that, it's still a very young and inexperienced team. And I think one of the things that we also saw is that this was CONCACAF in a nutshell. Even though it wasn't, down in Honduras or down in Mexico City or anyplace else, this was a CONCACAF type of game, from the environment to the style of play to the refereeing. And for a lot of these players, this is the first time that they are going through this. And so this was huge, because it's only going to get worse in qualifying. And an understanding, whether you're a Serginho Dest, or a McKennie or a Sargent or a Reyna or anybody else as to what this is all about, and that it doesn't matter where you play or what you have done or what pedestal you have been put upon. CONCACAF will bring you to your knees, regardless of your name or how much money you're making or what league you are playing around the world. And the sooner you are able to adjust to that, to recognize you're not in Kansas anymore, although who knows, they might play in Kansas, the better off you are going to be. And that progression and that growth is happening in real time, and there's not a lot of opportunities. So I think this couldn't have gone better for Greg Berhalter, not just in the result, but the way that this all came about. And we should mention that they do have another game, because this was a 4-game type of scenario that was set up to happen. So now they go and they play Costa Rica in a friendly, right, Mosse? Is that's right?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. A bit anticlimactic, but still we'll see if they can build off the momentum now that they've generated with this win. I know you're going to be talking about the crowd later on in a more serious vein, but a couple of fun crowd notes. Stephen Mandis, a recent guest of this podcast, the author, attended this game and sent me pictures this morning, and yeah, he had great seats, so he got an up close view of all the craziness there. So
there were some really cool pictures, you know, and it was fun to see everybody screaming and yelling, and you know, to see Gio Reyna's parents up in the stands.
Yeah.
You know, that was really, really cool and special.
I was thinking about this. What's unique about this rivalry now? If you're American, maybe you don't love this because you'd like to have more of a home field advantage. But what is unique is for the games that happen in the United States, this mixture of like a lot of fans from each team at the game, which you don't get, you know, when Brazil plays Argentina in Brazil, it's all Brazilians, and Argentina, it's all Argentines. If it's England, Germany, and England, it's all English people. If it's England, Germany, and Germany, it's all Germans. But there's this unique aspect of this rivalry where the games that are in the United States, you have sizable amounts of both sets of fans. And so it makes this great juxtaposition where, you know, when the U.S. is attacking, that the U.S. fans perk up and you feel this real energy in the stadium. But then when Mexico comes back the other way, Mexico fans perk up and you feel this energy. So there's never a let off. It's this back and forth nature to it, it makes it really exciting. It feels like almost like a big college football game in a way. And so, yeah, I mean, the atmosphere last night really elevated the whole thing. I thought it was incredible.
It was great. It was great. And, you know, these players, and it's not as if they haven't played soccer before or they're not aware of it, but now they've been baptized in USA Mexico, and their lives will never be the same. and and as we go forward, we're hoping for another one. We're hoping for another ceremony, if you will. And you know, we might get it with the Gold Cup, albeit with probably very, very different collection of players, but still, it means something. And you saw in the celebration, and you know, holding up the trophy and the confetti and the screaming and yelling and the excitement. And I think it was made that much more meaningful to them because of the environment in which they did it. And that's great. It was wonderful. I was with somebody actually at the time who was with us on the night that in 2017, the Cuba night, when the U.S. failed to qualify for the World Cup, and we were juxtaposing the experience and ultimately the moment at the end of this game, and just the, you know, that joy and that sense of celebration and accomplishment in that moment that we, as U.S. soccer fans, we want to have. And we were denied a few years ago in the cruelest and worst possible way. And this doesn't make up for it. That's not what I'm saying. But it was nice to be back there screaming and yelling and having a good time and celebrating a U.S. win against our biggest rival. But there will be another one. You know, they keep coming. Anything else, Mosse, on this game?
That's it.
All right. We're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back, there's so much stuff going on around the rest of the world, and it's constantly changing. So we're trying to make this as evergreen as possible and to be as topical as possible. But we recognize that we're recording this once again on this Monday morning, and things could change. But we're going to talk about the Euros, which are coming up, Copa America, which is coming up, some coaching, all sorts of stuff that's going on around the rest of the world. All right, don't go away. All right, we are back. All right, Mosse. All right, so the Euros are starting up here. one of the big international tournaments out there, and obviously chock full of incredible talent. But this is 2021, and so these are the 20. And hope I get this right. These are the 2020 Euros, and they will be called the 2020 Euros, but obviously they are being played in the summer of 2021. Not the first tournament to have been postponed, but since they are representative of what was going to happen in 2020, they are going to continue to call it that. Should we go through who's in the tournament, Mosse, and then kind of go from there?
Absolutely, I'm ready.
All right. Who? Other than, it's easy to pick France, right?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So first off, we should say unique way, the way this tournament is structured. There are games across 11 different countries in Europe. It's something they're trying. It was meant to be for 2020 to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the first Euros. And so the tournament is spread out all across Europe. The first match Friday is in Rome, Turkey, Italy, and then it culminates. The semifinals and final are at Wembley, and it's 24 teams, which I don't love, by the way, because it creates that 4 best third place finishers advanced thing, which I don't like. And there's the group of death with France, Portugal, and Germany, which would have been very dramatic. But the fact that all 3 teams could advance undercuts a little bit of that drama. So there is that issue to it. But no, very excited. Should be terrific tournament. So yeah, I'm happy to go through it.
All right, so here's the venues: London, Munich, Rome, Baku, Azerbaijan, I think, St. Petersburg, Bucharest, Amsterdam, Sevilla, Budapest, Glasgow, and Copenhagen. Does that sound about right?
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that correct.
Sounds about right. Qualification, right? 6 groups, right, Mosse?
Right. So 6 groups of 4, the top 2 in each group, and the 4 best third place finishers advance, which will set up the knockout stage with 16.
All right. Group A: Turkey, Italy, Wales, and Switzerland.
I am very high on Italy. Ever since Roberto Mancini took over, he's got him playing some lovely football. It's not the most star-studded team, but they've got good players and they've got a real nice thing going there. That midfield with Barella and Jorginho and Verratti, if he's fit. You've got Bonucci and Chiellini at the back, Donnarumma in goal. And we'll see if up front if Immobile can knock in the goals. But I'm very high on this Italy team. To me, they're actually one of the favorites to win the whole thing, which of course means I think they're going to top this group. Yeah. Turkey are interesting. You've got Burak Yilmaz coming off this incredible season with Lille, helping them win the league on title. Çalhanoğlu in the midfield there. Wales, we know, will be Gareth Bale. They had a very good Euros back in 2016. And then Switzerland just faced the U.S. in this friendly, so we know what they're about. So pretty solid group top to bottom, but Italy, the class of the field.
Let's do I know there's some third place teams that can come out. Let's just do the top 2 that you're guaranteeing. So I got Italy and Switzerland. Would you agree or no?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'll roll with that.
Well, yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah. Okay. No, but that makes sense.
If you're a big Turkey fan or something like that.
Italy and Switzerland. Yep.
Okay. Group B: Denmark, Finland, Belgium, and Russia.
So Belgium, the class of the field here. We'll see about De Bruyne. He picked up that injury in the Champions League final. And we'll see about Hazard. Nobody knows what to expect from him in this tournament, given how poorly he's played for Real Madrid the past 2 seasons. Was it the environment at Real Madrid? Is he going to flip the switch now and get back to being the Eden Hazard we're grown accustomed to? And obviously Lukaku coming off his incredible season in Serie A. So loads of talent here. And certainly the class of this group, I expect them to win it.
Okay. All right. So I got Belgium and Denmark going through. Do you have Finland or Russia?
Honestly, I haven't really put too much thought in who would finish second in this group.
Well, when has that ever stopped us before, Mosse?
Okay, yeah, I'll go Belgium, Denmark.
I feel like I'm just pushing you into all these things.
Far.
All right, Group C: Netherlands, Ukraine.
I mean,
all right. Group C: Netherlands, Ukraine, Austria, North Macedonia.
I suppose the Netherlands would be the favorite here, although any team coached by Frank de Boer, I'm not going to put that much faith in. And Van Dijk, he wasn't fit enough to play in this tournament. But still, you got Memphis Depay up there, Jorginho Wijnaldum, Frankie de Jong. Jorginho Wijnaldum, by the way, is about to sign with PSG, spurning Barcelona. Frankie de Jong, Matthias de Ligt at the back. So they've got some good players and probably should be the favorites in this group.
All right. I am going to pick for this one. I'm going to pick the Netherlands and the Ukraine. So I'm sorry, North Macedonia.
Ukraine is weak.
So you got Austria instead?
That's a little cheeky Seinfeld reference for.
I get it. Okay, all right, I get it.
All
right, Group
again,
D.
I didn't know we were going to do these sorts of predictions, so I haven't put that
Oh,
much.
we got to talk about it. I mean, it's happening. Do you not want to do a prediction? We certainly don't have to do predictions, but as long as we're here, we might as well.
Okay, I'll go Austria instead of Ukraine, just so we have some difference.
Oh my God. Group D, England, Croatia, Scotland, and the Czech Republic.
This is a fun group. Super high on England. I think they're one of the top favorites to win the whole thing. I'm enamored of their young talent. The fact that you have in one squad Foden, Mount, Sancho, Rashford, Bellingham, and then obviously Harry Kane leading the line. So yeah, they're the class of this group. You do have their old rival Scotland in there, so that game will be fun. And of course, you have the 2018 World Cup runners-up Croatia, Luka Modric still leading that midfield. So, and the Czech Republic are no pushover. So this is actually a very interesting group, top to bottom.
Okay, so would you say that you would, if you had to pick one, would you go with Croatia or the Czech Republic?
Croatia, a bit of a spent force. I don't think they're quite as good as they were in 2018, but I'll still pick them to finish second in this group.
Yeah, I will too. Group E, Spain, Sweden, Poland, and Slovakia.
Interesting one. Spain, crazy situation involving them. Sergio Busquets tested positive for COVID, and now they're worried that he might have infected other players in the squad. So they're going to have they skipped their last pre-tournament warm-up. They were supposed to play a friendly against, I believe, Lithuania, and they weren't able to play that game because of this whole COVID situation. And so now they're going to have a test just days before the start of the tournament. And depending on how many players test positive, they might have to draft in a bunch of new players at the last minute. Supposedly Luis Enrique has this alternate list he's been putting together. But so COVID affecting this tournament as well. It's not just the Copa America. And I will tell you that I wasn't that high on Spain to begin with. As we get farther and farther away from that golden period, the names get less and less impressive to me. They're obviously good players. Anybody that follows European football will know all these guys, but it's not, you've got Morata leading the line, Ferran Torres, Pedri's a good player. I liken him. He's the Spanish Gio Reyna. And in the midfield, you still have Thiago and Coque. And I thought Busquets. We'll see now what becomes of that. At the back, Pau Torres and Laporte. And Llorente, I guess, might play as a fullback, Jordi Alba. So listen, names of note, but it's not anything overly impressive. I don't love Luis Enrique as a manager. And now you throw this drama on top of it. So I'm actually not all that high on Spain. In this group, you've got Poland with Lewandowski. You've got Sweden, who knows Zlatan. Unfortunately, he was going to play, but then injury knocked him out. But still, good team, reached the quarterfinals of the last World Cup. So I don't think it's a given that Spain tops this group.
All right, but who? But you're saying they're still going through, right? So I got Spain and Sweden, and and Poland. I mean, I think it's a toss-up. Sweden and Poland.
I'll go with Sweden and Poland as a top two.
Okay.
I'll say that all this craziness really knocks Spain off the rails. Although, as I said, they could finish third and still advance. So that's not necessarily the death knell for them. But I'll go with Sweden and Poland.
All right, Group F. Normal circumstances, this would be the group of death, but
it is for Hungary.
Well, exactly. No, Hungary's winning this group for sure. Hungary, Portugal, France, and Germany. Oh boy. All right. I mean, so they're all going to come through, right? They'll find a way to be one of the best third place teams, right? Or not. I don't know.
You joke about Hungary. There's some echoes to the 2014 World Cup when Costa Rica was in a group with Uruguay, Italy, and England. Everybody thought they were roadkill in that group and ended up winning it. So you never know.
Things can happen.
But
no, I got France and Germany coming through as the top two.
Yeah, I mean, just to go through each of these teams individually, France, you mentioned at the very top, they are the favorites. They've, essentially taken the team that won the World Cup and added Karim Benzema to it, which that situation is so interesting to me because, his exclusion was never for footballing reasons. So it was always a non sequitur to me whenever he had a great game or scored a great goal and people pointed out and said, oh, how could he not be on the France team? It had to do with the Valbuena thing. So I'm not sure what changed there. Apparently him and Deschamps had some sort of sit down. I don't know why this couldn't have happened years ago, but they finally talked it out and Deschamps got to a place in his mind where he felt okay ending Benzema's exile. So now you add him to a front line that already includes Mbappe and Griezmann, and you could even try to work in Kingsley Coman into that, and you've got Pogba and Conte leading that midfield. So it is just scary. I mean, I suppose the one chink in the armor might be that some of those center backs aren't coming off great seasons for their clubs. Rafael Varane wasn't that good for Real Madrid. Longley had a rough season for Barcelona. Kimpembe wasn't that good for PSG. But I mean, I am searching for the one dark cloud in a clear sky. This team is absolutely loaded. They are the favorites to win this thing. Portugal, they haven't played that well, but I keep saying I'm enamored of their talent. I mean, the fact that
I know, we love
now surrounded by João Felix, Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, Diogo Jota. You've got Renato Sanchez and Ruben Neves in that midfield, Ruben Diaz, João Cancelo, Rafael Guerreiro all at the back. It is just an embarrassment of riches, but we'll see if they can actually put it together. And then Germany are so interesting to me because awful at the last World Cup, and results since then have not been good. You've got Jogi Löw in this lame duck situation with Hansi Flick already lined up to replace him. So you kind of think, oh, Germany, this might not be the tournament for them. But man, you look at the squad and the names still ring out, especially now that he's brought Muller and Hummels back into the fold. And my God, I mean, it's up and down. You've got Rudiger and Süle and Hummels at the back, and Kimmich and Goretzka and Gundogan and Toni Kroos in that midfield, and Thomas Muller and Havertz and Sane and Gnabry and Werner coming off, I know, this strange season with Chelsea, but still, there's amazing talent there, and they're Germany. So, they might be like it's funny to talk about Germany as a sleeper, but they might be kind of more dangerous than people realize. So, yeah, this group is fascinating for sure.
All right, when I go over to FoxBet here and I look at the odds for the outright winner, they got France at 1, England at 2, Belgium, Spain, Germany, Portugal. That's your top 6 basically.
I would. Wait, did you not mention Italy anywhere in there?
They would be 7.
Oh, boy, that's great odds.
But to be honest, they have the same odds as Portugal, so I guess they would be co-6, if you will.
Yeah, I would move Spain down that list and move Italy and Portugal up. Portugal are the defending champions after all. It's easy to forget that.
Well, you can make some money then, Mosse. You can go over to FoxBet and make some money. To your point, and you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, I would put money on Germany. I think, yes, there is a lame duck aspect to it, or there is going out in a blaze of Jogi Löw glory. And the talent isn't in question here, but I think that there is some motivation to have this moment be, and like I said, there's plenty of talent to do that. Top goal scorers, if you're interested in what the odds and all that kind of stuff are, Harry Kane is at number 1, Lukaku, then Mbappe, then Cristiano, and it goes on from there. Benzema, who you mentioned. So there's plenty of opportunities there. All right. Anything else, Mosse, on Euros? We look forward to watching the games and the production from our friends over there. I think it's ESPN. And to your point, with all of these different locations, it will be interesting to see how it all plays out. Anything else, Euros?
No, that's it.
Okay, let's quickly go into Copa America, the ever-changing world of Copa America. I know that you are actually coming to us off of yet another call because, you and all the leadership over there in Fox, you go and talk amongst yourselves about the ridiculousness that is those of us in front of the camera. I get that. But you also do a tremendous amount of work. And look, we are flying by the seat of our pants. It is it is so interesting how much our world has changed and how much that world has changed us in terms of how we go about. I mean, you talk about some of these tournaments that have, sometimes they are awarded these things and there are, bid committees and incredible amounts of infrastructure and years of preparation to put on these tournaments. And, we're a week out from the beginning of the tournament of Copa America as we record this. And things are still kind of being settled when it comes to what is going to happen. We are going to have this tournament, it turns out. It is going to happen in Brazil. Mosse's got to be happy about that to a certain extent. It is going to feature all 10 teams from CONMEBOL in 2 groups, a North and a South group, and it will you will play your 4 opponents in your group of 5. So 4 games, and then you'll go on to knockout rounds type of thing. How do you want to do this, Mosse? You want to look at the 2 groups, or you want to give a little more of a primer over there? I mean, some of these places I've certainly heard of in terms of where the games are being played, and even that was up in the air. And who knows? when the tournament ultimately kicks off, who knows where these things are ultimately going to be played.
First up, the North and South group thing is when the tournament was going to be in Colombia, which is the northern part of South America, and then Argentina in the southern part. I'm not sure that's a thing anymore. It might still be listed as that. But,
Group A and Group B. It's still, I mean,
right. It's still
okay, yeah.
Group A and Group
but
B.
they were called South and North
at one point, yeah, in this whole process. So the latest is it's going to be held in 4 different cities in Brazil: Rio de Janeiro, Brasilia, Cuiabá, and Goiânia. And the original dates still stand, June 13th until July 10th. And the final will be at the Maracanã, July 10th. The first game, June 13th, Brazil-Venezuela, is in Brasilia, a stadium that I mentioned last week. I attended for the last group game in the 2014 World Cup, 4-1 win over Cameroon. Even Fred scored in that game. Argentina begin the next day against Chile, rematch of the 2015 and 2016 Copa finals. So yeah, listen, we're taping this on a Monday morning. It's fluid. So by the time you hear this, something that I just said might not be applicable anymore. But as of now, that's the plan. And also, by the way, these countries haven't named their squads yet for this tournament. They named squads for these World Cup qualifiers that are going on right now, but they have the right to tweak it for Copa. So I might mention a player who I'm assuming is going to be on one of these squads, and it turns out he's not. So if that happens, my apologies. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's 2 groups of 5 each. 4 teams advance, which, if we're being honest, is a little tedious, all that to weed out 2 teams. And then the 8 will move on to the knockout stage, and we'll have quarterfinal, semifinal, and final.
Okay, so Group A, which was the South Zone, or what we can call it that or whatever, but Group A includes Argentina, Bolivia, Uruguay, Chile, and Paraguay. Group B, the North Zone, if you will, includes Brazil, obviously the host nation, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Peru. If I go over to Fox Bet over here and I look at the odds for the outright winner, they got Brazil naturally. It would, even in normal circumstances, regardless of where they're playing, you would have them rated high, and then Argentina a close second, and then it kind of drops down there. Uruguay third, Colombia fourth, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Paraguay, Venezuela, and last, my good friends Bolivia, that are plus 10,000 if you care about that. So you can make a lot of money over there, but a lot of stuff would have to happen. How do you anticipate? How do you think that this tournament is going to look? We know that it's not being done in front of fans, so we're gonna have some enhanced audio, and we're gonna make it as appealing as we possibly can to the viewer out there. But you're still seeing some great teams, and hopefully, fingers crossed, some great individual players and some world-class players out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, even though it's on Fox, we can acknowledge the elephant in the room. There's a weird vibe heading into this tournament. And even the group stage might be a little tedious with all these games just to weed out 2 different teams. But I do think once the ball is rolling, you know how South American football is. It's so passionate, and people will get into it. And particularly when you get to the knockout stage, and if you get these matchups, Brazil-Argentina, Brazil-Uruguay, Argentina are close to winning it, which means Messi's on the doorstep of finally winning his first senior trophy with Argentina. Then people are really going to get into it. And yeah, we should go there first, because that is the biggest storyline of this tournament. Can Messi finally break through? He's got a team here where a funny little thing has happened with Argentina in this cycle. After the last World Cup, they hired Lionel Scaloni as an interim coach just to keep the seat warm while they actually went out and tried to hire a real coach. So he was really nothing more than a glorified Dave Saracen, but they weren't able to find anybody by the time the 2019 Copa America rolled around. So they said, okay, I guess we'll stick with Scaloni for that tournament. And mind you, they didn't even win the tournament. They didn't play that well, but he really connected with the players during that competition. The circumstances of their semifinal defeat to Brazil, they felt like they got cheated in that game. Messi came out afterwards and went on this huge rant and got himself suspended. But all of that had this galvanizing effect on that squad, where they came out of that tournament with everybody behind Scaloni. They gave him the job permanently. Messi seems more invested than he's ever been in the national team. They've played pretty well since then. They look more organized than they have in years. And it's Argentina. There's still plenty of quality there. You've got Aguero, who just signed with Barcelona. So if he gets on the field with Messi, that's interesting. But it's really Lautaro Martinez that's going to be leading the line with Messi behind him. You've got Di Maria, Ocampos, guys like Paredes and Lo Celso and Rodrigo de Paul in the midfield. There's some questions at the back, but no, I mean, it would not surprise me at all if Argentina won this tournament. I think they've got a good team and a good chance.
I mean, you mentioned the the bigger picture type of stories. Anytime that Messi is involved in a tournament, it's the opportunity for him to reach this pinnacle and kind of check that box. And, we saw when we did the Centenario, and obviously, the World Cups, that they come and go. Does he need it? I mean, no, he's still going to go down as arguably the greatest player ever to play the game. But in the inevitable compare and contrast that we do with diminutive, talented, left-footed Argentinians, with the late, great Diego Maradona. Go ahead, Mosse.
Oh, by the way, never won this tournament. Neither Pelé or Maradona ever won a Copa America. So,
but at this point, it's just win a tournament. So it doesn't even matter, right? I mean,
it could even be the Nations League, and he
right. Exactly. That's what they should do. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to stay with that group or.
Yeah, hang on. Bob Lawless here is having a little conniption fit, so I'm gonna let him out the door here. Hang on.
All right.
This is staying in the podcast.
I agree.
Sorry about that. Okay, I am back. Bob is not having this Copa America. All right, he doesn't believe that it's a true, authentic, and genuine Copa America. I disagree. I think it's just going to be different.
So are we staying in this group, or do you want to jump around and just?
Yeah, I mean, let's jump around a little bit. There's plenty of connections. If you haven't followed Copa America, there's plenty of connections that will be made, plenty of MLS players that are involved. The U.S. in the past has actually participated in Copa Americas, so there is a history, not necessarily a long history. I played in a couple of them. It's a really, really interesting tournament, and the compare and contrast and the juxtaposition with the Euros that go on in terms of the environments and the styles and all that kind of stuff. It's fun. And you were earlier in the pod talking about CONCACAF. It's hard sometimes to define it and to explain it to people, but you know it when you see it. And I'm sure a lot of that is also when it comes to CONMEBOL and what happens in some of these Copa Americas. And to your point, while it's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be ideal, hey, I think everybody has come to the realization that pretty much nothing that we do in this moment in human existence is going to be real. Is going to be ideal, but you got to be able to bob and weave and adjust. And I think that's what CONMEBOL has done. And I'm not saying that there's not a business behind it, but they've adjusted, and players ultimately adjust. And when that whistle blows, the adrenaline starts flowing, and the opportunity to win something big that can never be taken away from you for a lot of these players who have grown up watching Copa Americas exist. So I think it's going to be really fun to see it, and albeit in a very unique way.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for MLS connections, Venezuela might be your team. There were 8 MLS players in their preliminary squad. We'll see how many make the final squad, but you could have Joseph Martinez, Jose Martinez, Christian Cáceres, Yonder Cadiz from Nashville, Soteldo, if he's fit, there's a question mark over him. But you could have a lot of guys. Other players to look at, Raul Ruiz Diaz, I expect to be in that Peru squad. Arriaga, his Seattle teammate, could be starting for Ecuador at the back. In terms of a former MLS player, Miguel Almiron will be playing for Paraguay. And so, yeah, there's definitely plenty to Felipe Mora for Chile. So there's could be no shortage of MLS guys in this tournament. And yeah, I mean, when I touched on Argentina, I should mention Brazil. The most interesting non-Neymar story in this tournament for Brazil might be Gabigol. I've said this before on this podcast. Brazil is a nation full of ALEXI LALASes. People who are fiercely protective of the domestic league. They bristle at Euro snobbery. They resent that the national team is now comprised almost entirely of European-based players. They don't understand why more weight is given to what a player does in Europe than in Brazil. And Gabigol has become the major flashpoint in that debate the last couple of years of what he's done for Flamengo. And folks in Brazil, they see that neither Firmino or Gabriel Jesus is lighting the world on fire, while Gabigol is killing it for Flamengo. They don't understand why isn't he starting for the national team, and they've pestered Chichi enough about it that he was compelled to call up Gabigol for this tournament. He started the last qualifier. We'll see if he starts tomorrow against Paraguay, but I think he'll get some chances in this tournament. And it's fascinating because it would be him playing alongside Neymar, and those two have had this kind of star-crossed path where they both came up through the Santos youth system. And Neymar's final match for Santos before going off to Barcelona, he was subbed out in the second half and replaced by a teenage Gabigol who made his first professional appearance that day, and it was intentional. They wanted that symbolism of Gabigol being the guy that was going to take the baton from Neymar. So he's been billed for a long time as the next Neymar. They've had a weird relationship over the years because Gabigol dated Neymar's sister, and they had a messy breakup, and so there's even that element to it. But they seem to be getting along now, and there's a chance that could be the attack for Brazil in this tournament. So we'll see. But other than that, it's the same guys. I mean, Neymar, Gabriel Jesus, Firmino, Richarlison, Casemiro leading that midfield. If Thiago Silva, if he's fit, and Marquinhos at the back, Alisson in goal. So it's not a lot of like new exciting. It's kind of the tried and tested, very experienced team. They won it 2 years ago at home. They're right now leading the qualifiers. So you're right. They're the betting favorite, and you'd have to say Brazil are the favorites to win this.
Can you let our listeners and viewers and peek behind the curtain a little bit about Tite and what he is or isn't, and this drama surrounding him both internally and externally? How is he viewed, I guess, by Brazilians, and how is he viewed by the Brazilian players?
It's extraordinary what's happened the last few days. You know, I've compared it to the Trump administration, where it's hard to keep up with the news because there's so much drama. So, you know, I mean, I don't want to make light of this, but, you know, Neymar was accused of sexual harassment by a Nike employee, and everybody thought that was going to be the big dark cloud hanging over the Brazil team in this tournament. And that now feels like 8 news cycles ago because so much else has happened. So, I mean, the long and short of it, Tite, who frankly, for his work as a coach, wasn't that popular, but he's been strengthened in a way the last few days because of just his character he's shown. So he came out in solidarity with the players and expressed concern about the staging of this tournament in Brazil and the way the whole thing was handled. And so it then took on this whole political dimension in Brazil because the president Bolsonaro, who's this very divisive figure, it was his idea to have the tournament in Brazil. So he views anybody that questions the tournament being in Brazil as a political opponent of his. And so he's gotten all his supporters to get after Tite over this. And so much so that the president of the Brazilian Federation was ready to fire Tite over this whole thing, over his disapproval of the Copa America being staged in Brazil. But he wasn't able to do it because he himself was fired, because in the midst of all this the last few days, he was subjected to a sexual assault allegation. And actually, it's more than an allegation. The woman that works in the Brazilian Federation actually had audio to back up her claim. So it's true. I mean, he's going to be ousted. And I mean, I won't even get into the details. You can read the article, but he made some terribly lewd remarks to this woman, and he needs to go. I mean, he's a despicable person. And so now the guy that was about to fire Tite got fired himself. And this whole thing has had a weirdly galvanizing effect on the squad. After each of their goals against Ecuador the other night, they all ran to hug Tite. And he's come out strengthened by all this because most people in Brazil reasonably see that, my God, what a disgrace that this man was going to lose his job just because he questioned having the Copa America and for political reasons. And so now everybody's suddenly sort of gotten behind him more than they were before. So it's been just a surreal last few days reading the Brazilian newspapers and following this story. And they're going to have to put all this behind them and go play in this tournament where they're at home and they're the favorites to win it. And we'll see how all that goes.
Goodness. What? As the world turns, this is like a soap opera, a novella, whatever. Listen, telenovela.
Look, Brazil and Argentina in any South American competition, they're the two favorites.
Yep.
But I would put Uruguay as a close third with Suarez and Cavani in that midfield, and Bentancur and Torreira and Valverde. And then that's probably it as far as top contenders. Then maybe a peg below, you've got Chile and Colombia, who, you know, no James for Colombia, but you still got Muriel and Zapata and Cuadrado and enough talent there. Chile are still trying to just squeeze every last drop from that golden generation because nothing too exciting has come up behind them, but you still got Alexis Sanchez there leading the line. And then anybody beyond that, it would be a major shock, with all due respect to the Paraguays and Ecuadors and Peru, Bolivia, Venezuela. You know, Peru did get to the final in 2019, so maybe I'm being disrespectful there, but I can't see any of those countries winning it. So, I mean, that's where we're at as far as the Copa.
Yeah, I think that and that's right along the lines of, as I said, the Fox bet in terms of what they are doing. They got that upper echelon of Brazil and Argentina, then Uruguay, Colombia, Chile, then your Peru's, Ecuador's, and maybe Paraguay, and then Venezuela and Bolivia. So I'm going to pick. You're going to go with Brazil, obviously, and it's an easy one, right?
Yeah, although I like this Argentina team. It's like a 1-1A for me.
Well, okay, if it was just about money, which one would you pick?
I guess Brazil.
Okay. All right. I'll pick Argentina. All right. And I will hope that there are more tears. But when it comes to a dark horse, I will go with, how about, I'm going to go with Peru. Okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Anything else, Mosse, on this Copa America? I mean, obviously we're going to be knee deep in it here come next week. Hopefully, I guess we're going to be knee deep in it. Yeah. You never know what's going to happen. But anything else before we move on from Copa America?
No, that's it.
All right. You were mentioning coaching and the drama surrounding coaches and everything like that. Well, the carousel continues to spin around when it comes to the coaching carousel. Where do you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I asked Jeff Hernandez to put this in the rundown just so we could pay off our conversation last week because I left some things open-ended and some questions were filled. So Real Madrid have hired Carlo Ancelotti to be their next manager. It's interesting because we didn't really mention this last week, but Zidane on his way out wrote this scathing letter. It wasn't the usual taking the high road Zidane. He really took the club to task for not giving him enough backing and said he was leaving because he didn't feel enough support. Basically, he was annoyed that he looks over at guys like Pep and Klopp and feels like they've built up enough currency at their clubs that whenever there's a bad run of form or a couple of bad losses, they're not in any danger of losing their jobs. And he felt like he should have had that status at Real Madrid after winning 3 Champions League titles and 2 La Liga titles. And yet he never did. It seemed like every time they had a little dip, there were stories about Zidane possibly losing his job. And he felt very uncomfortable.
But he wasn't fired.
No, yeah, that's interesting. But he just the very suggestion that he might be was enough to irritate him. And so he made it clear in his letter. He doesn't need a break. He wants to keep coaching, but he just doesn't want it to be at Real Madrid anymore. And it's interesting because
if it's really preemptive in that he thought he was going to get fired, or if it's just poor little Zizou isn't getting enough love and attention and pat on the back. I mean, come on, man.
It's interesting because at one point they seem to have dabbled with Antonio Conte, and there is this feeling that Florentino Perez, for whatever reason, is drawn to disciplinarians. He doesn't like coaches that are too chummy with the players, which is why he's always loved Mourinho. And yet the track record suggests that the coaches that have had the greatest success under him at Real Madrid are the players coach types, Del Bosque, Ancelotti, Zidane. So he did come to his senses on that and hire Ancelotti, who was a guy personality-wise much more similar to Zidane. But there's some questions. Listen, Ancelotti's resume speaks for itself. 3 Champions League titles. He's won league titles in 4 different countries, which doesn't include Spain, by the way. So if he were to win La Liga with Real Madrid, he'd have league titles in the top 5 leagues in Europe, which is crazy. But and he's a very different character than Mourinho, much more amiable, obviously. But there is the trajectory of their careers is somewhat similar in that there are some questions about whether Ancelotti's still a top coach, and then they might be getting him when he's sort of past it here. And I think people were frankly surprised that this is the direction they went. I mean, off a 10th place finish with Everton, you get the Real Madrid job, but it's a little weird. But nevertheless, that's the route they've chosen. So
you're not buying Carlos?
Yeah, I think it's a real question mark. And then Antonio Conte.
Why? Because he's too old, ageist.
Antonio Conte, then after not getting the Real Madrid job, he considered Tottenham, which would have been an amazing coup for Tottenham, but had people scratching their heads from Antonio Conte's perspective. Like, really, that's where you're going to leave Inter because they're not ambitious enough and you want to try to win the Champions League and they're not going to spend enough money to do that. And to go from there to Tottenham. And it seems like Conte came to his senses on that and said, no, wait, this is too much of a step down. Let me wait for something better, even if I have to take a year sabbatical or whatever. So, and yeah, I'm curious to see how this Inter offseason plays out, because if it is this huge fire sale, and they've got these guys like Lukaku and Lautaro and Barella and Bastoni and Hakimi who are very much in demand, and a bunch of them leave and they take a major step back, he'll be vindicated in his decision. But if it's like one guy they sell, then I'm going to wonder if it was an overreaction on his part and he should have just stayed at Inter and tried to build off what he accomplished this past season. So, but for what it's worth, Antonio Conte and Zidane are both out there looking for jobs, and
does anybody want to coach at Tottenham?
Well, the other guy that was mentioned was Pochettino, but PSG have nipped that in the bud. So, I mean, I know Jeff Hernandez still put that in the rundown, but it seems like that's over and he's going to stay at PSG. The other interesting thing is there's a guy named Luis Campos I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, who is a Portuguese sporting director who was the architect for both Monaco and Lille's Ligue 1 titles recently. He is very much in demand. In the last few days, I've read Real Madrid for him, Arsenal, PSG. Now, Real Madrid and PSG would be really different types of challenges for him. It's not easy, that transition, when you're sort of a money ball guy at smaller clubs, punching above their weight, finding diamonds in rough, to then go to Real Madrid or PSG. And that's a whole different sort of transfer environment. So it's someone to keep in mind. But nevertheless, other people seem as high on him as I am, because he's now become like this guy that the clubs are falling over themselves to get. So we'll see what he
look,
has.
hold on. I've heard this before about, going to a bigger club, and it's a different environment and different pressures and the dynamic behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff. But if all your success is predicated on making the most out of what little you are given, then I know it's theoretical, but in theory, if you are given more, you should be able to make more, right? I mean, this notion that, now you can't do your job because you actually have the resources and the money to do it, that doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Maybe you're right. Maybe he'll seamlessly shift into that. I mean, you do agree Real Madrid and PSG employ a different transfer strategy than, say, Lille or Monaco. It is a different.
Yeah, it should be even easier for you. You don't have to find the diamond in the rough. The diamonds are just lined up, and you get to decide which diamond you want. Oh my God!
But yeah, it's been,
cry me a river. How do you say that in French?
I mean, just to wrap this, it has been amazingly tumultuous, this coaching carousel. Now, one coach who is staying is Ronald Koeman at Barcelona. They came out and said that they're going to stick with him for another year. It wasn't really a ringing endorsement. You came away feeling like they would have liked to have made a change. They couldn't find anybody, so I guess we'll stick with Koeman for another year. But yeah, I mean, you look at top three in the Bundesliga all changed. Bayern with Nagelsmann, Leipzig with Jesse Marsch, and Dortmund with Marco Rose. Lille, Christophe Galtier, after winning Ligue 1, dropped the mic and walked away. So they're going to have a new coach. Lyon with a new coach. They hired Peter Bosch. You have Tottenham are going to have a new coach. That's it for the big six in England, but still Real Madrid with a new manager. And then all the changeover in Italy. I mean, you've got Inter going from Conte to Simone Inzaghi, Juventus going from Pirlo to Allegri. You've got Napoli going from Gattuso to Luciano Spalletti. Gattuso then went to Fiorentina. You've got Lazio lost Simone Inzaghi, so they hired Maurizio Sarri. Roma bringing in Jose Mourinho. So, I mean, just a lot's going on managerial-wise. It's been already a crazy offseason on that front.
Well, it'll be fun when these leagues kick back up in the fall and we start attaching the results to these personalities and to these coaches. And then, as we often do, we start judging them and who got it right and who didn't get it right. All right. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right. We're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi or Ask Mosse, or just send us a question, comment, and concern out there on all the different platforms. We've talked to you before about this telephone number that we have. This week, we're not doing any calls. We didn't get any usable calls. The telephone number, by the way, is 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. And you can call and you can hopefully give us your name and tell us where you're calling from, and then a question out there. And if it's good, we use it. If it isn't good, we still have plenty of questions to cull from when it comes to Ask Alexi. All right, Mosse, what do we got here in a much more traditional sense coming from the interwebs and the social media platforms out there?
Usually we save the fun ones for last, but I'm going to start with this one.
Oh, okay.
V wants to know, Oreos dipped in milk or nah?
All right. Nah. I think that it is performative BS. Okay. And I think it rarely lives up to the promise that the decades old marketing campaign that we have had out there promises. I believe that if you really want your milk and Oreo mixed, just take your bite from your Oreo and then take a sip. Now, part of it is, look, I know it's to each their own. Do whatever you're going to do, but I just don't find it as satisfying. As a matter of fact, I think that you are creating a mess unnecessarily. Some people revel in that mess. I don't. I mentioned that I was watching the U.S. game, Mosse, yesterday in a bar, and we ordered some burgers. And I'm a friend of mine. I'm going to say it's a friend of mine, even after I explained to you what he did. He ordered it with a fried egg on top, and he ordered it extra runny. Now, from a taste perspective, as is the case with milk and Oreos, I have no problem with it. I enjoy that. That's fine. But how I go about getting that taste is different, especially if I am creating a mess. I don't like a mess, especially when it comes to food. And, you know, inevitably this burger came with him yesterday and there was yolk all over the place, which I know is what he's going for, but I want no part of that because it is just, it's just too messy, unwieldy. I don't want to deal with something like that. So do what you're going to do with your Oreos, but I would rather, as I said, bite the Oreo and then have the milk. I would rather not have a runny egg all over my sandwich and or hamburger that then I have to attempt to navigate on the plate where stuff's going all over the place and it's just basically a shit show. Mosse, what do you think? Oreos, yes, no? Do you even eat Oreos?
I do eat Oreos. I don't dip them in milk. No.
You don't dip them in milk?
No.
Because you don't like the taste of it? Or you just don't like drinking milk?
No. Yeah, that's never been a combination for me. I know other people do it, but I just like drinking. I just like eating Oreos without dipping in anything. I
mean, I drank so much milk growing up. My mother would buy us 2-gallon jugs of milk, and I remember chugging it after. It was ridiculous. I don't know. For those of you that are lactose intolerant out there, you're probably going to have to turn this off. I remember chugging those 2-liter bottles of milk as if it was water. It was a form of my hydration when I was young. Oh, the amount of milk that we drank. Anyway, Mosse, what else we got?
Next up is Michael Bratcher, who asks, Alexi, what is the MLS newly proposed third-tier league for?
Okay, so news has trickled out here that MLS is in the midst of creating a bridge, if you will, and what would amount to a third division type of competitive league in an effort to, like I said, provide that bridge, an in-house bridge, because it would be part of the MLS structure, and that bridge between, you know, the academy teams that they have, and then ultimately, I guess, the senior team for all the developing MLS talent. And we've talked so much about how much money and resources is being spent on this development of talent, but you got to have the infrastructure and you have to have places for them to play. In doing this, they're also going to obviously create more content, which can be beneficial to broadcast deals. And they've been all very open about this is what they want to do. They want to, bring and share that footprint of lower division soccer, but bring it into MLS and under that business umbrella. And in doing so, create a competitive option out there for the consumer. And they're going to create a testing platform. We've seen MLS in the past use the MLS system, if you will, to do some different things when it comes to testing or evolving or being guinea pigs for stuff that they're doing. And I think ultimately from a business perspective, like I said, it increases that portfolio and therefore the value of the portfolio is of MLS. But also it potentially encroaches, if you will, or provides an alternative in some markets out there possibly that have teams. I mean, MLS is very, very clear that they are a business and they want to, as much as they possibly can, drive the business of soccer going forward in the United States and Canada. And they are going to do everything that they possibly can to have their fingers in as many different pots as possible to be able to control that at multiple different levels. And this is just another in that effort to do it. Will it hurt or destroy existing teams and clubs and infrastructure that exists out there? I don't think so. I think the two can be aligned and can coexist in different places, but there will be competition at times for the hearts and minds of people that are potential customers of lower division types of soccer. The other thing is, and we've seen this when you are a satellite, we see it with MLS even, there is a perception that you are of lower quality. and that you are not necessarily, well, you're not a standalone type of team, and you are looked upon that as just the satellite and therefore inferior than the major product, which in this case would be the big MLS team. I'll be interested to see how a customer or consumer out there looks at this when they are looking at their landscape and trying to figure out what they're going to buy. And if they look at these teams in whatever form that they show up with as suitable alternatives to what they maybe have been spending their money on and their time and effort, or if they say, you know what, that's not something that I want to do. If I want to support an MLS team, I'm going to support the ultimate MLS team over there, and I don't want a knockoff or a smaller, lower division type of MLS light team. But MLS wants to bring it all in-house, and so that's what they're doing. It'll be interesting to see ultimately how big this is, and therefore how much of an impact it has for the MLS teams, for MLS as a whole, and for the the soccer landscape out there. What else, Mosse?
And last question, Alex Glissman. Why can't CONCACAF or FIFA take a tougher stand against poor fan behavior? If this was an NBA or NFL game, obviously he's referring to the US-Mexico game last night, we would be talking permanent suspensions, yet it seems like people weren't even kicked out.
Well, we mentioned we were going to talk about the crowd last night in Denver. Hold on, Mosse. This is another good example of maybe something that hold on. We're gonna come back, and I'm gonna use this as my one for the road here. Okay, so we're gonna take a real quick break, and when I come back, I will, as the end of each podcast, I will give you my one for the road. But I'm going to use his question to talk about the crowd in the one for the road. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, Mosse, and what was his name again?
Alex Glissman.
All right, Alex, you are asking a question, and you are examining something that a lot of people this morning, Monday, are looking about and talking about, and that was the behavior of the crowd in Denver last night at the final of the Nations League. And this will be my one for the road. I've been around a long time. I have seen how this sport has grown both on and off the field, and these environments that we have created, and how wonderful they can be, and how much they have grown as the soccer fan base in the United States has grown. It's become so much more passionate and educated and discerning. But when it comes to US-Mexico, we all know that in many places, if that game happens, it is an away game for the US. Now, that doesn't mean that the stadium isn't packed with Americans, okay? But there are, because of our incredible diversity in our country, there are Americans, fellow countrymen of mine, that when the United States is playing in Mexico, because of their history and because of their lineage and because of their family, they feel more comfortable supporting the Mexican national team. Fine, no problem with that. I honestly have no problem with that. It's something I've tried to convert as many over the years as I possibly can, both on the field and off the field, but I recognize it. And I have no problem with it. I understand the draw. Okay. But what happened last night in that stadium, it's not an anomaly. It's not an aberration. We have seen it happen before with regards to the Mexican national team playing in the United States. And so when people are throwing stuff on the field, and look, I get, the one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. This wasn't one bad apple. You can go see the pictures for yourself. But as I said last night on Twitter, I thought that this was the behavior of the fans in the stadium last night in Denver was disgraceful. And I thought it was disrespectful to the sport that we all know and love, and ultimately to our country, because this was a game that was happening in Denver, Colorado. And this was a stadium full of Americans who felt that that was appropriate. And it's not appropriate. It's never appropriate. Okay. And unfortunately, we see it time and time again. Now, to your question about how you police it. All right. Well, we've seen it when it comes to trying to stamp out the offensive chant that has happened for so many years on goal kicks in these games. And you have to put in place, and they do have protocol in place, and we saw it even in this tournament at times. And is it making a dent? It's trying to, because you're faced with the fact that how do we change the behavior and alter the behavior of people and let people know that that's not appropriate and that is not acceptable in this type of forum. And the punishment has to be there. And unfortunately, because there are so many people, you can't single out and punish every single person, especially when masses and crowds are doing something. You got to punish the people on the field. And, at times they stopped the game yesterday to make sure that was happening. It wasn't necessarily stopped for the throwing objects on the field. Now, at times I've talked about these environments that I've played in. And yes, I will readily admit that there is a part of me that has that punk ethos and enjoyed the bathing in the hatred and in that sports forum that we talk about. But in no way, shape, or form would I ever condone anybody doing that any place in the world. Okay? And so when I see that last night, as I said before, it hurts me, because I think that it makes us, and when I say us, Americans and America, look bad in that situation, because you are representative of what we do in the United States when it is happening in a stadium. Okay? And it makes me look bad. It makes our sport look bad, as I said, and ultimately it makes our country look bad. So what can you do? Yeah, you can punish teams. But by the way, this was a game that was being played, as I said, in the United States. And you can punish federations, you can fine federations, but ultimately it has to come down to the human beings that are involved. And each individual human being, even within a crowd setting, and we know that when you get in crowds, sometimes you do things that you would never think of doing alone. But it comes down to individuals saying in that moment, no, I may hate this team, or I hate this player, or I'm angry that my team lost. But that doesn't give me a right individually to throw stuff at players, to throw stuff on the field, and to behave in that manner. And you can be pissed off, and you can scream and yell and do all things like that. But it was, as I said, it was not surprising, but again, it was disappointing. And I don't know what the answer is other than teach your children well, and none of us out here are saints. We've all made mistakes before, but this is habitual. I mean, this is a consistent type of thing. And like in a lot of things, you have to put the onus on the individual, especially in the crowd. And I tell my kids all the time, there's going to be times when you are in a crowd and you are going to go along or want to go along with it. And if you recognize that it's wrong, you got to be able to stand up individually and say, no, I'm not going to do that. And you shouldn't do that. And self-police. And it's easy to say, because I get it. I've been in crowds before. And that crowd mentality that takes over, that makes people do things that they normally wouldn't do. But it was disappointing. It was great pictures, and the scene that it was, in a strange way, only made what was arguably one of the great U.S.-Mexico matchups that much more interesting and colorful. But I'd much rather it be much more boring than have players have stuff thrown at them. So hopefully we get better and better with each generation when it comes to supporting the U.S. Like I said, I want to prove to people that we are worthy of their support. But whether you're supporting the U.S. or whether you're supporting Mexico or any team out there, it doesn't matter. No matter how pissed off you are, it doesn't give you a right. And in no way, shape, or form should it ever be condoned throwing stuff at players. All right, Mosse, anything before we move on?
That's it.
All right, listen, we come to the end of yet another State of the Union. We appreciate everybody downloading and reviewing and subscribing and rating and doing all that kind of stuff. As we talked about this pod, there's so much soccer this summer that's happening, and that it's going to happen with Euros and with Copa America and with Gold Cup, with the Olympics. We'll be working the U.S. women's national team this game as they prepare for another Olympics. So men's, women's, all sorts of stuff going on. I hope you enjoy the week. We will talk again next week. At that point, we will be, fingers crossed, into Copa America 2021. All right, until next week, have a wonderful, safe, and sane week. And as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.